Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Carly Thumper Skelly took to her social media, and she had this to say. She says, so apparently, Amy's team have said she will not be taking the rematch on her apparent draw for the Commonwealth title, which she recently pulled out of with an apparent injury. And if, in fact, bigger things to come than a Commonwealth title. It sounds a lot like Carly Skelly is feeling raw that the rematch isn't happening. It sounds like Carly doesn't actually believe that Amy was injured, and you know, she's not happy about it. I saw that fight.
Good fight.
Tight fight that took place on the undercard of Usyk versus Chisora in October of last year, and I wasn't at odds with the judges. I mean, I could see why they scored the fight a draw, but it's a fight where, you know, the impression it left me with was Amy Timlin. She looked very uncomfortable in there. This was a battle of the unbeatens, two unbeaten prospects, Carly Skelly, Amy Timlin.
At 122 pounds.
I think the saving grace is that both of these fighters are unbeaten fighters, and the door's not closed on a rematch, not completely. It's something that could still happen sometime down the line. Perhaps the Timlin people felt that taking on Carly Skelly for a second time, taking her on straight away, is more trouble than it's worth.
She's a very physical fighter.
Very aggressive, very rough and tumble. The aesthetic of the match and the contrasting styles of the two fighters in the fight, you know. On one end, you got Carly Skelly, who is the so obvious come-forward aggressor, and on the other end, you have Amy Timlin, who's more finesse than ferocity. I want to say that, you know, I agreed with the draw. I could see why it was scored that way. It's just that throughout the course of the match, you could see Amy Timlin. She's uncomfortable in there. She's getting pushed around that ring, can't establish the jab, can't establish her range. Hard to land clean shots on a fighter that's playing you so close to the chest. I reiterate, maybe the Timlin people felt that, you know, fighting Carly Skelly, it's more trouble than it's worth.
Carly's not happy about that.
Carly seems to have really wanted that second opportunity. She wanted that rematch, so, you know, make of that what you will. If Carly and her people were more receptive to the rematch than Amy Timlin and her people, what are you supposed to say?
What are you supposed to call it?
The saving grace is that there are a lot of other opportunities for the both of these fighters at 122 and 118 pounds. So,
Yeah, I understand that Carly's upset.
all you can do is just roll with the punches and see if you can get yourself another fight.
Ebony Bridges.
Yes.
I think she wants to be signed by you, mate.
We're talking. I've actually made her an offer. I've got another fight with her anyway, but I would like to extend that. I mean, you know, she caused a lot of views, headlines. But
Turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, but the thing is, for cutting all that to the side, she put up a great fight. Talk about women's boxing. When there's hype for that, and when, you know, there's all this talk about, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't wear that. But if they would have got in there and it would have been poor, it really actually would have affected women's boxing. So I feel like they had a lot of pressure on their shoulders because everyone's waiting, aren't they, to criticise or moan. You know, wanted to wear underwear at the weigh-in. Oh, this is a joke. Oh, but actually it went the other way and it was so good. So a lot of people watched it. A lot of people engaged in the build-up. A lot of people interacted and a lot of people were excited for that fight. That's how you're going to increase the money. Because it comes down to, and I keep saying this is the Clarissa Shields effect, right? Just because you are an undisputed two-weight world champion in women's boxing, it doesn't mean you make the same money as an undisputed male fighter if your value is different, right? Clarissa Shields has huge value. She's a huge name, but as of yet, she doesn't draw the numbers of an undisputed two-weight male champion. When they do, they must be paid the same. That's equality. right? And I don't go too deep about women's boxing money and men's boxing money. It's just how much is that fight worth to the card? How many tickets does that sell? How many subscribers does that drive? That's how you represent the value of a fight.
That's what it all boils down to, folks. That's the infrastructure of the sport in a nutshell. A fight's value is not based on ideals. A fight's value is based on cash money and interest. How much of that the fight generates. And based on that, that's what determines who gets what.
Champion and challenger.
Because in the sport of boxing, based on its infrastructure, it's actually possible for a challenger to have more marquee value than a champion. And situations like that, where you might have a challenger that has more marquee value than a champion, and that challenger with that marquee value wishes to challenge that champion, that's a situation where you have to pay to play, you understand? The champion will have certain entitlements, but in a nutshell, being a two-division, undisputed champion does not mean you're a big draw. The hope is that by the time you amass these accolades, these achievements, you will have also amassed a large enough following that will make you a big attraction, make you a marquee fighter. And in the case of Clarissa Shields, unfortunately, in spite of a lot of talking heads that you might find on social media, you might find in the comments under YouTube videos referencing her, these are not people that are adding value to Clarissa Shields. The way you add value to Clarissa Shields is you buy her fight if that's what you have to do to see it. You pay for a ticket to be in attendance, because outside of that, YouTube comments, nobody gets paid in YouTube comments.
And nobody's just giving money away.
Not the promoters and not the networks that they strike deals with. Ultimately, when you want to get paid a certain way, that has everything to do with the size of your following. Does that mean you got to start rescuing cats from trees and start kissing babies at store openings? No, you can do what you want. You can be who you want. However the fuck you want to be, saying whatever the fuck you want to say.
You can.
The same way that the audience at large is free to feel about it however the fuck they want to feel about it. It's a case of causality.
You can be who you are and people will love you for it.
Or it can go the other way. You can be who you are, say what you want, people won't love you for it. Maybe they'll hate you for it. It all depends on those people. And this is a business that is driven by those people.
This was never about sexism.
And even though we're on the subject of equal pay in women's boxing, this was never actually a problem based on equal pay, because in the sport of boxing, there is no such thing as equal pay. Not for men, not for women. Not all men are paid the same. Women aren't either. This is a marketing issue.
More than anything else.
If the size of the purses to the fighters is to increase, that is where it will happen. That is how it will happen. By identifying what the actual problem is.
Because idealism will get you nowhere fast.
Marketing, promotion, and self-promotion are the tools that will affect the greatest change in who's getting paid what in the sport of boxing. In heavyweight news, it has been revealed that Daniel Dubois, on the heels of his loss to Joe Joyce, will be back in action in May on the 6th against Bogdan Dinu. That's the same Bogdan Dinu that took on Jarrell Miller. That's the same Bogdan Dinu that gave Kubrat Pulev quite a scare on the road to that Anthony Joshua fight. So if you will remember, he gave Kubrat a pretty bad cut.
Gave that fight a sense of urgency.
I want to say that this is a pretty solid opponent choice for Daniel Dubois, who's rebounding off that loss to Joe Joyce. I'll go as far as saying that this is the kind of guy that perhaps he should have fought before he fought Joe Joyce, as this guy has been in there with world-level contenders like Jarrell Miller, probably on the sauce in that fight. Better still, he's been in there with guys like Jarrell Miller. He's been in there with guys like Kubrat Pulev. It's a situation where a guy like Bogdan can give Daniel enough adversity to work around, but not so much adversity that he'd be in over his head. As Bogdan Dinu really is a part-time boxer in every sense of the word. He's a member of the Romanian SWAT team. He moonlights as a boxer, and in that way, he's a 4-round fighter. He can make things interesting for the first 4 rounds, but after that, he starts to fade. Now, this fight between Daniel Dubois and Bogdan Dinu is set to be for the WBA's interim title. And there is a slight frivolity to that, because Daniel Dubois is coming off a loss, ain't he?
Bogdan Dinu's coming off of 2 straight wins.
So what are we to believe? that the WBA so decided to make this an interim title fight on the premise of Bogdan Dinu's 2 consecutive wins, 2 consecutive victories over fringe-level competition.
Is that it?
Outliers, no-hopers. Is that what we're supposed to believe? That the WBA so decided to put this version of their title on the line because Bogdan Dinu beat 2 unheralded guys? No, I don't think so. I think that Daniel Dubois has more to do with why the WBA decided to make this an interim title fight than Bogdan Dinu does. And you want to pay special attention to that. You want to pay special attention to that because the winner of this fight is going to be the mandatory challenger to Trevor Bryan's version of the title. That's the same Trevor Bryan that here today is the front runner for Dillian Whyte's next ring appearance. So what happens if Dillian fights Trevor, beats Trevor, and procures that WBA regular title? That would make the winner of this fight his mandatory challenger.
It's not a guarantee that Dillian fights Trevor.
But that's what the story seems to be. Trevor Bryan seems to be the front runner for Dillian Whyte's next fight, it being that the fight is planned to take place here in the United States, here in America. And, you know,
When in Rome.
I mean, is Dillian Whyte flying over from the United Kingdom across the Atlantic Ocean to fight some guy from Bulgaria or some guy from Croatia?
No.
I don't think so. I think that, you know, when in Rome, you make like the Romans, and Dillian Whyte is looking for an American opponent to make a splash here, stateside. Trevor Bryan is rumored to be the front runner for that assignment. And if it is Trevor Bryan he fights, things are going to get very interesting very quickly. How do you guys feel about Dillian Whyte? How do you feel
About Trevor.
he'd fare against Trevor Bryan?
Does he win?
And if he beats him, do you think that a fight between Dillian and the winner of this fight takes place, or will Dillian Whyte decide to chuck that title because it's just a trinket title anyway?
What do you think happens?
We know that old fish eyes, Frank Warren, before Daniel Dubois lost to Joe Joyce, he had an expressed interest in having his man Daniel take on Dillian Whyte. He was very enthusiastic, seemed very confident in his guy. And how do we know that he still doesn't have that course of action on the brain?
In mind.
A potential Daniel Dubois versus Dillian Whyte fight. The news of Dillian Whyte potentially taking on Trevor Bryan for Trevor's WBA trinket title, that news broke before this news broke. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware of that. And because that news broke before this news broke, you have to wonder that Frank Warren didn't orchestrate this situation to be for a WBA trinket title.
You wonder.
The interim title to Trevor's regular title. You have to wonder that he didn't do that with Dillian Whyte in mind. You also have to wonder that with this news breaking, will Dillian Whyte decide to go another route? Perhaps he doesn't fight Trevor Bryan, because if he does, he may have to face the winner of this fight, young Daniel Dubois. I'm just speculating. I'm just bouncing ideas around.
I don't know what the fuck he's gonna do.
Maybe he fights Trevor anyway. I'm just saying, in the event that he doesn't, what are people going to say? This is one to watch out for. It really is. And finally, in super bantamweight news,
122 pounds.
you know, on the heels of Neary versus Figueroa being announced, and that the winner of that fight would go on to face Stephen Fulton in September in a unification match, Stephen Fulton had this to say. He said, "Unified, then undisputed. Hashtag can't be stopped." Essentially, what Stephen Fulton is communicating here, Stephen Fulton, the reigning WBO super bantamweight champion, is that he's not going to stop with the winner of Neary versus Figueroa. He means to go after MJ Akhmadaliev, this division's unified champion, only unified champion here and now, though that could change once September rolls around. The thing is that Stephen Fulton is over there on the PBC side of things, you know. He's a part of that big announcement. He was a part of that big announcement that the people over there at Showtime made yesterday. The announcement that everybody's talking about, that first we're going to get Neary versus Figueroa, then the winner of that fight will move on to face Stephen Fulton. So what are we looking at here? You know, should we believe that Stephen Fulton will move on from the winner of Neary versus Figueroa, if he is successful against the winner of that fight, to take on MJ Akhmadaliev? As much as I'd like to think that that would be the course of action, the pecking order, the sequence of events, the sequence of fights, I'm not convinced of that, because Daniel Roman is on that side of the street, along with Stephen Fulton, along with Brendan Figueroa and Luis Neary. And who's to say that once the smoke settles between Stephen Fulton and the winner of Figueroa versus Neary, who's to say that Daniel Roman isn't afforded an opportunity? I'll say this much about Stephen Fulton. I think he's a special fighter, I really do. I think he's a special fighter who's on a particularly good run. He's taken on 3 unbeaten contenders in succession. Undefeated Isaac Avalar, undefeated Arnold Kagai, undefeated and reigning WBO Super Bantamweight champion Angelo Leo.
The winner of Neary versus Figueroa, regardless of who it is, they'll be undefeated too.
That could bring the head count to 4 undefeated fighters.
4 of them.
2 of them world champions. That could bring the head count to 4 undefeated guys back-to-back that Stephen Fulton will have beaten if he is successful against the winner of Neary versus Figueroa. And if I'm being honest, I like his chances. I like his chances against Brendan Figueroa. I like his chances against Luis Neary, who really hasn't impressed me his last couple of outings, his last couple of fights. I'm not that high on Brandon either.
You could give him good odds to beat either one.
And if he does, ladies and gentlemen, you're talking about 2 unified world titles from 2 separate unbeaten world champions. That's pound-for-pound stuff, is what that is.
He'll have beaten more world champions than MJ.
2 to MJ's 1. MJ won both of his world titles from the same guy, Daniel Roman, who's on the PBC side of things now. Whereas Stephen beat the then unbeaten Angelo Leo, and if he beats the winner of Neary versus Figueroa, that makes 2.
The Super Bantamweight division is heating up.
A division not traditionally popular here in the West with an American audience, so the Americans, at least now, they've got a real pony in the show, a real stallion. In the mean-in-between time, MJ has officially been ordered to face his WBA mandatory challenger, Ronnie Rios. He just satisfied his other mandatory challenger by way of the IBF, Iwasa. They've got until May 6th to reach a deal, or the fight will go to purse bids. And I've no doubts that MJ is going to decide to defend his titles against Ronnie Rios, take care of that business because, well,
The hell else does he have going on?
he won't be unifying titles with any of the other world champions at the weight in the near future. Might as well take care of business and hold on to what you've got. I think that Ronnie Rios fight will get made in a timely fashion. But you really have to wonder if this division is going to see an undisputed champion in the next 12 months, in the next year or year and a half. I mean, I want to believe Stephen Fulton.
I'd like to.
As a fighter, I think he has that desire to establish himself as the authority at this weight. It's just that the politics of boxing are the politics of boxing. And sometimes, even when the fighter wants to fight for legacy, politics get in the way.